today I'm taking a look at a $180 to $220 budget mini PC by the brand NiPoGi. To be exact, this is the GK3 Plus equipped with the Intel N97 CPU. There's no N95 or N100 inside this device, but rather the more powerful Intel N97 processor, a quad-core with integrated graphics that is capable of powering even 4K UHD monitors at 60 Hz. On top of that, there's 16GB of RAM and a 512GB NVMe SSD part of it all. On Amazon, the GK3 Plus goes for a regular price of $220 but occasionally can even be purchased for $180, or over here in Europe for 200 to 260 euros, depending on the deal. The only question that remains is what such a thing is ultimately good for, what can you even do with it, and what's the power consumption, the noise level, as well as temperatures like. The scope of delivery looks exactly as one would imagine for a device of this type. The mini PC itself, the power supply with a rated output power of 30 watts, an HDMI cable, a VESA mounting bracket with screws, and even more screws for a 2.5-inch drive. Last but not least, a very useless quick start guide. First of all, I'd like to point out that the entire case of the GK3 Plus is plastic, yet still makes an acceptable impression as far as quality is concerned. In fact, silver doesn't even look bad on this device. We can in fact consider this mini PC to be fairly compact with dimensions of 132 by 131 by 48 millimeters. Although, of course, there are even smaller mini PCs to be had on the market, regardless of performance. I'm going to emphasize once more that within this small powerhouse resides the Intel N97. This CPU is based on Alder Lake N and saw the light of day in Q1 2023. However, it is a pure quad-core processor without hyper-threading. This device comes with the CPU's maximum RAM configuration, namely 16GB of DDR4 3200 MHz, and as for storage, a 512GB M.2 NVMe SSD has been installed based on PCIe 3.0 X4. So in theory, it's not super duper fast, but for the sheer majority of users, it could be described as lightning fast. This is confirmed by the read and write speeds. The RAM is actually operating at 3200 MHz as stated, but runs in a single channel configuration, since the N97 processor doesn't actually support dual channel in the first place. If we now take a look at the bottom of the device, we see a pretty large fan. According to the manufacturer, the built-in cooler should be able to dissipate 12 watts. If you wanted to dig deeper into the device to remove the motherboard and whatnot, all you have to do is remove those rubber feet on the bottom and then loosen 4 screws. However, if you wish to carry out standard upgrades, such as for RAM and SSD, you should only have to loosen a single screw for that slider and then use it to unlock the mini PC's top cover. We are then granted access for an SSD upgrade, namely one using the 2.5-inch form factor, which I personally always find to be great. However, if we were to loosen 3 more screws right beneath the SSD bracket, turn out to be the RAM and M.2 SSD. Unfortunately, we do not actually get a second M.2 slot, but then again, that might be asking too much. Very well, let's talk ports. Right next to the power button are 2 USB 3.2 Gen 1 and a single USB 2.0 port. Around the corner, there's yet another USB 2.0 port, followed by 2 HDMI 2.0, 1 gigabit LAN, 3.5mm audio, and a Kensington lock. Even further around the corner, there is a surprising old-school VGA port for antique monitors left over in many offices, or just the right thing for a retro PC setup. Unfortunately, we are not graced with any USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports, nor is there any USB Type-C, and there's also no sign of any SD card reader. The latter, in my opinion, definitely should have been included. On the other hand, I find the 2 HDMI outputs quite appealing. A big advantage of the N97 over the N95 is undoubtedly the significantly improved 4K UHD monitor support. With the N97, I was actually able to power every 4K UHD monitor I own at 60 Hz, whereas with the N95, it was often a 30 Hz slow motion slideshow. Of course, Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.2 are on board. By the way, pre-installed comes Windows 11 Home with a decent language selection during its initial setup. Windows 11 version 22H2 is installed. Updates must therefore be carried out urgently. The operating system was activated by the manufacturer using a digital license. After checking, it is in fact an OEM license. Nothing to complain about here. Out of the box, there is no bloatware or any third-party software pre-installed. A nice clean Windows installation, it appears. Fortunately, there don't seem to be any questionable processes running in the background, nor do any suspicious services start up with Windows. Only Microsoft Edge comes pre-installed as the web browser, which is to be expected. As it should be, no browser extensions have been snuck in. However, since one or the other mini-PC brand was caught of preloading malware onto their systems in the past, after those incidents, I decided to scan all devices that come with Windows for malware or any kind of malicious software. The first scan with Windows Defender/Security came back clean. The external full SSD scan with Norton also came back clean. NiPoGi have obviously provided the user with a clean Windows installation. We do get a few customization options to play around with in the UEFI BIOS, even though these are of little use to the average consumer. Now, if the CPU is put under full load, I was able to read out a clock speed of around 2.9 GHz for the Intel N97, which remains stable and unchanged even after several minutes under load. The N97 allows itself a max CPU package power of 15 watts. Once the Cinebench 2024 test has completed, today's GK3 Plus, thanks to its N97 CPU, has a 13 to 17% performance advantage over an Ace Magic S1 or AK1 Plus, both of which are equipped with the Intel N95. It is obvious that although the N97 does not bring groundbreaking extra performance to the table, it still performs respectably overall. The N97, without a question, is certainly more powerful than the N100, which unfortunately is not part of the charts. Nonetheless, it's also clear that with such a budget device, you will position yourselves within the lower performance tier out there. A GK3 Plus does pretty well, handles web browsing and normal office, as well as everyday tasks fairly well. Streaming 4K videos and movies is not an issue at all. It all runs buttery smooth. If you're going to use this device for image and video editing, your expectations need to be lowered drastically. I mean, it works and can be done, but it's honestly not really suitable for that if you're really serious about those use cases. At the same time, you shouldn't have high expectations for gaming either. Some AAA game titles from past years may end up somewhat playable at a lowered resolution of 720p and lowest graphics settings, but any high hopes for this being a tiny yet capable gaming PC should be thrown out of the window as quickly as possible. Well, at least this device should be able to handle a few older or fairly current indie games. Now, what would the power consumption, temperatures, and the noise level of such a mini PC within this lower price range look like? Surprisingly, things are looking really good. Whether it's idling, watching a movie, or even at full load, the GK3 Plus remains extremely power efficient, fairly cool, and also pretty quiet thanks to its N97 processor. At most, you hear a slight hum when the fan is spinning up, but at a measured 41 decibels, this is to be considered very quiet. If we now simply compare the power draw of this mini PC with the one of an average desktop PC, it becomes really obvious as to how power efficient such a cute little mini PC actually is. And it's worth noting, the desktop PC tested is also pretty power efficient to begin with. Conclusion. I'll be honest with you, the NiPoGi GK3 Plus does exactly what I expected it to do. It is a fantastic office machine that is quite compact and above all, power efficient. Of course, the use of such a GK3 Plus with the N97 CPU does not have to be limited only to office work. The device, needless to say, is just as great for everyday tasks within your own home. Of course, you should never forget about the price, which is why we shouldn't expect too much. You should probably stay away from such device if you have to deal with more demanding tasks, ones an Intel N97 simply wouldn't be able to handle. Personally, thanks to being able to upgrade and install a 2.5-inch drive into this mini PC, be it SSD or HDD, I see a great opportunity to set up a really power-efficient NAS using this device. Not a gigantic one with a ton of storage, but you get my point. I'm sure content with what today's NiPoGi GK3 Plus offers. Sure, USB-C and an SD card reader would have been ideal, but apart from that, you can't go wrong with this particular mini PC within this price range. Would you buy a mini PC within this price range, or would you rather spend a little more money to get a bit more performance? What are your thoughts on the GK3 Plus I reviewed today? If you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like, and if you didn't enjoy it, simply hit the dislike button. With that in mind, thank you all for watching, and until the next one.